Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay. Hello again, gentlemen, all across the fruited plain and all over the globe, wherever you may be. This is your boy, Scott McKay, once again, hailing from sunny San Antonio with another episode of the Mountaintop Podcast for you. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming a guest who I've been friends with for quite a while. He's an interesting cat. His name is Mark Mahwini, and he's from Canada. Mark, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you too. This is probably yet another show that's a long time coming, not only because of the topic, but because we've been meaning to have you on as a guest for quite a while now. You are the head of the snake over at Natural Born Coaches. You have a wildly popular Facebook group called The Coaching Jungle, which is pretty much the go-to place, the go-to hangout on Facebook for people who are coaching other people. So essentially you are a coach of coaches.
For lack of a better term, yes.
Well, go ahead and give it a better term if you got one. Go ahead and explain to these guys exactly what you do, because I think that's important.
My official, I call it a barbecue pitch. So assuming if you and I were at a backyard barbecue and we're munching down on hot dogs, and you could still do that this any time of year, probably in Texas. Canada, we can't certain times of the year. But my barbecue pitch, if you said, what do you do, Mark? I'd say I help coaches get more clients without paid advertising. So that's my official thing. It's all organic, not paid. It's showing them how to get more clients, more business without paying out for advertising.
Well, I know you do wonderful work, and I've been inspired by a lot of what you do, and a lot of what you teach and what you're about has helped us here at X and Y Communications. So for the benefit of the guys listening, yeah, you're welcome. The benefit of the guys listening, this guy's the real deal. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic today, because I think just about every guy lets this insidious thought process sneak into their psyche and indeed let it infiltrate their lives, at least at some point in their lives. And the topic is, why don't men ask for help? Now, this is a running joke amongst guys, really, isn't it? I mean, you can drive around, suburban St. Louis all day, not knowing where the hell you are, and you'll never stop and ask for directions. Thank God for GPS and cars nowadays. But I mean, back in the day before that was a thing, wives would stereotypically get upset at their husbands for not stopping and asking where they are, for not looking at a map and saying, I got this, I'll figure it out. I know my wife and I have almost missed airplanes because of my own stubbornness in this area. But really, that's just an example of the mindset that guys have, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse because men, and this may be politically incorrect to say in 2018, 2019, but a lot of what's happened in society, men have built, right? And it's because of that stubbornness and our willingness to do things. So it's not just a curse. I think it's a blessing as well. But you're right. Men are afraid to ask for help often.
Well, that's very fascinating that you would say that. And first of all, it's okay to be politically incorrect around here. We just throw things on the table and hash them out. It's a blessing and a curse that men don't ask for help. I think you're the first person I've ever noted to say that it's sometimes a good thing not to ask for help. Are you talking about kind of that self-reliance kind of mindset that makes a man a leader, or are you talking about something a little different?
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at my own life and my own business, I'm the type to just go do something. I don't like to wallow in self-pity, and I just get out there and I say, I'm going to figure it out myself. I'll throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, what doesn't stick, and I don't get caught up in my head too much. And I've not painting all, say, women with the same brush here, but I do find that women overall tend to overthink things perhaps more than men. And I think men often have a bias towards action, and women, just with the way it is, they like to think things through a little bit more and stuff like that. And I think that's reflected in business as well. So that's how I've been now. That it sometimes has caused massive catastrophe. I've gone through 2 business closures, but I've had a lot more success over the years in business taking that approach, where a bias towards action, I would say. And if given the choice, I would choose that approach as opposed to overthinking things and delaying.
Well, how do you think that in particular intersects with the whole idea of not asking for help? I mean, can we act with a team of other people who are helping us do that? Or is the tendency for men more like, well, you know what? I got this. I'm an expert. I don't want someone to come in and muck this up for me. I don't need the waters muddied up with someone else's opinion. That'll just take extra time. It's much more streamlined if I do this and I get it right. And, then if it goes wrong, I only have myself to blame. Is that kind of the train of thought?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what I mentioned about a business closure. Before, I've been coaching now for about 5 years, but before my coaching life, I was in real estate for a decade throughout my 20s. I started when I was 21. And for almost that full decade, I had no failures or anything. My revenues were just skyrocketing and I could do no wrong. And I was a cocky 20-something-year-old full of piss and vinegar. And I'd been approached several times by coaches. Now, this was back probably 2005, 2006, and when coaching wasn't what it is now. But I thought, why would I need a coach? Look, I got it all figured out here. Look at me, And then I went through business closure in August of 2009. That, I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened, but certainly wouldn't have been as painful. And maybe it wouldn't have happened if I had had a coach. So there's a good example how I was able to build a business up to a really successful business, but then it came crashing down because I wasn't willing to ask for help and show any vulnerability. I was a lone wolf. I was proud of that as well, where I didn't need any help. I had it all figured out. So now, years later, the approach I take when it comes to getting help is I look at who's giving the help. So if I take you, for example, or any of the other great people I've connected with, if you give me feedback, I'm going to listen to it. If it's Joe Blow, who I don't know, who lives in his mom's basement in Boise, Idaho, and rolled out of bed this morning and listened to one podcast and sent me unsolicited advice, it's a little different, right? I look at who's delivering the feedback, and that's, so I accept help now, but I am picky with who I accept help from.
Well, there's a lot to talk about there. Let's just go backwards to forwards. The whole idea of unsolicited advice. The feminists like to call it mansplaining. And let's face it, Mark, men mansplain each other. Women mansplain us. It's really just the whole idea of unsolicited advice that gets used as a feminist weapon called mansplaining. And we universally can't stand it. I mean, some Joe, some stranger off the street goes, hey, you know what, partner, you might not want to do that way. You want to do it a different way. And your first impulse is, even if the guy means well, is to give him the middle finger and tell him to stay the heck out of the way and stay in his lane and mind his own business. And I think men actually are more likely to feel that way than even women are. Women, for all their vitriol towards men mansplaining them, we really can't stand it. I know my kids are involved in BMX, and my daughter is very small, so setup is very, very important on their bikes for weight and, making sure it's sized right. And all I have to do is unload her bike out of the back of the truck. And some guy's already telling me how I need to change wheels or handlebars aren't right. My daughter is like nationally ranked, and we do this to each other, It's like, hey, your daughter would be faster if she did this. We do this to each other constantly, and we do it at work. We do it on the softball field. We do it in our bowling leagues, and we can't stand it when other dudes do it. Now, if it's one of our best friends and they're giving us some tough love, or, God forbid you're in a situation where someone's about to get seriously injured if people proceed in the manner they're proceeding in, then I guess the whole mansplaining thing, the whole unsolicited advice thing is something you're going to have to take a social risk with and go do. I mean, I'm thinking of a time where I was at a big, busy gas station and people were trying to jump a battery next to the gas pumps.
Ooh,
taking the clips and making sure there were sparks coming out of them. And I said, hey, excuse me, before you guys make sparks where there are gas fumes, why don't you allow me to go over there so you don't blow me up? And the guy, dropped F-bombs on me and told me to mind my own business anyway.
Yeah, that'd be like me if I was crawling into my tub to get a bath. And this, of course, wouldn't happen because there wouldn't be a stranger in my bathroom. But if there's a stranger that, hey, you may not want to.
You're no fun, Mark. Come on.
Yeah, I know. Us Canadians, we're boring. But let's say I'm getting a bath. I'm about to pull my radio into the water with me or something like that. And a stranger's in there and says, hey, you may not want to do that. There's advice I want to take. But if it's someone who's never built a business, for example, and they're reaching out with, you hear the word that's thrown around, or the phrase is concern troll. I don't know if you've heard that. A concern troll's someone who reaches out to you as if they're out of concern, but they're really kind of trolling you. So it might be, you and I both do daily emails, and we're both big fans of it. If I reach out to you and I didn't know you and I said, hey, Scott, yeah, look, I'm doing this out at, like, I really want to see you do well, and I'm concerned for you and stuff. I think it's a little too much with daily emails. A few people have said stuff. I just wouldn't want it to hurt your business, so you might want to pull back. That is a perfect example of type of critics out there that are trying to, crabs in a bucket, pull you down, but not make it look like they're pulling you down. And that's what you have to be very careful of online, where any idiot with a keyboard can give their unsolicited advice.
Right. I think just about all of us have that aunt in our family who, whenever she comes over your house or you go over her house, she's strategically leaving books on the table, hoping you'll find them.
Yes. Well, I won't mention any names, but I have someone on my Facebook who's, very nice lady. But if I ever talk about politics, I'm very careful. I don't want to get mired in a political debate 24/7 with strangers on Facebook.
Right. But don't ask for help on who you should vote for ever right now.
That's right. Well, I will occasionally, I have strong political opinions, and I will occasionally share those political opinions. And she has messaged me and said, oh, you probably shouldn't talk about politics when you're in business or whatever. Then I go over to her Facebook wall and it's just all, blasting Trump and anyone who's right of Bernie Sanders, she's running down or whatever. Usually when people say you shouldn't talk about politics when you're in business, what they're really saying is it's cool to talk about politics if you're on my side of the fence, if you agree with me. But if you are opposed to me in any way or not exactly aligned with my political views, you shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah, I think the only people who don't agree with everything you just said are people who are really, really on the extreme end of the right or the left and think, why, this should be 100 billion to nothing. I mean, they should have voted for my person. There's something wrong with you. I saw someone who posted something extremely self-righteous about how all women have to be this way. And if they're not, then someone needs to enlighten them. And my simple thought, I dared not write it because I have better things to do than to get stuck in the mud with this, but maybe some women like it that way. Maybe some women don't want to change. Maybe they like what this person is saying is so terrible. I think we're getting a little off track here.
Yeah.
But politics is a great way to find lots of people giving you unsolicited advice immediately just for you having shown up. One of the other things you mentioned when you were talking previously, Mark, was this whole idea of being young and ready to take on the world and having this huge vision and just thinking, I got this. I can do it all myself. If I outsource something, if I hire somebody who knows how to do this, they're just going to get in the way. They're probably not going to do it as well as I do. And you said, in a very vulnerable way, you presented that you lost that business precisely for that reason. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't raise my right hand and say, you know what? That happened to me also. I started X and Y Communications in 2005. Thankfully, I somehow outlasted my own arrogant stubbornness, but for years there, I absolutely did hamstring the growth of this company by thinking I had it myself, graphic design, web design, videos, this, that, and the other. And my thought process was always, look, if I don't know how to do it, if I don't have the expertise for it personally, then it must be so incredibly expensive and complicated and requires such otherworldly talent for someone else to do it that it's going to cost me an arm and a leg, and I'm not even going to know what's going on with the process, and I'll just get taken for a ride. Little did I know all this time, Mark, that there were lots of people out there, perfectly normal people like unto me and you, who have a completely different set of talents in life, and they're just good at that stuff. And who knew that I could get done for about $50 what it would take me 5 years to do right if I ever learned it all. And yet, what did I do? I didn't even go out and ask. So the day I finally got a web designer who knew what they were doing, a video producer, graphic artist, all these people who were wonderful and fast and efficient and not even expensive at what they did, my business just went so much better and I was so much happier. Things I didn't even know how to ask for, like, what's funny is I didn't know what an affiliate program was. I didn't know why a whole bunch of emails had a Weber at the bottom of them, probably for the first 8 or 9 months I ever did this business. And finally, you get a hey stupid email from someone who, well, I guess is, a concerned troll, someone mansplaining you, unsolicited advice. And it's like, well, you're angry at first, but then you go, oh my God, maybe they're onto something. Maybe they know what they're talking about. But yeah, I mean, a lot of guys will do this. We'll decide we're an expert at something. And because we're an expert at what we're good at, we think we've got to fill in all the gaps ourselves, do everything right. And in reality, the people who are most successful in this life are people who realize when it's time to hire someone smarter than they are to get it done. And I think that comes with maturity, doesn't it?
No, totally. I mean, I hired my first official VA team in February of 2018. They started the beginning, so early in 2018. Up until then, I think I had VAs and freelancers for individual tasks, but never a dedicated team. And I prided myself on being that chief cook and bottle washer, right? It was a lone wolf entrepreneur or whatever. And in my mind, I knew, this probably isn't the right way. You should get help. Still, it's tough to let go. You get your fingers grasped onto every task like we're the master of the universe for everything. And it was tough to let go of some things, but it felt much better. I got away for, I remember shortly after that for a week in Mexico. And I was like, oh, wow, I don't have to be glued to my phone or my laptop while I'm down here because I have help finally. It was nice to get that off my shoulders.
Yeah. It's like, you resist this for years and years and years. And then when you finally go, all right, look, maybe I need some help. You go, wow, this is freaking great. I should have done this years ago. So, I mean, I can relate exactly to what you're saying there too. You mentioned a couple other things that I don't want to let kind of flow under the bridge without having been talked about. This whole idea of women wanting to talk things through and ask for help and guys not doing that. And whether it's because of self-reliance or stubbornness, that doesn't only happen in business. It happens in our mental health. It happens in our physical health. We won't go see the doctor when we're having symptoms. We won't go see a therapist or talk things through with someone when we're really struggling. And sometimes it causes us our sanity, and it even causes us our lives sometimes. What can you say to the guys listening to turn that ship around? Because I think both you and I, as coaches who for a living help people who ask us for it. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't go around giving unsolicited advice, even when I see guys screwing up with women before my very eyes out there. But what would we tell guys to say, hey, look, you know what, man, if you have a need, get it taken care of. You don't have to handle everything yourself in this life. What would you tell guys?
Well, here's a perfect example how bad we are, guys asking for help. Back August of 2009 with that business closure, in that week when it first happened and the few weeks after that, I had lost roughly 30 pounds. Now, I'm not a big guy to begin with. I shouldn't be losing 30 pounds. And at one point I hadn't eaten from Wednesday. It got to Sunday night. And I thought, when did I eat last? I'm like, oh my God, it was Wednesday. And my wife, now my ex-wife, but we get along fine, but we were married at the time, and she kept trying to get me to open up because my face had shrunk. You could pull my pants down even with the belt on the tightest rung. Obviously, I was like a zombie. Obviously, I wasn't in a good place going through this closure, and I still wouldn't talk. She couldn't get me to, she's trying to get me to talk and to open up or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I've lost, a good chunk of weight, and I'm like a walking zombie going on 20 minutes sleep a night. But hey, I'm fine. I got it handled. And that whole process, I talked to very few people going through that. So that shows how bad it is for men. Now, knock on wood, I'll never go through that again. I hope not. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but I do think I'm in a position, if I ever went through anything bad like that again, that I would be mature enough to ask for help and wouldn't see it necessarily as a weakness. Like I would have back then. But what can I say to guys? I mean, I know it sounds like common sense. It's like, I'd say just do it. So you ever see the Bob Newhart skit on Mad TV? Just stop it. That one?
Can't place that one.
Yeah, a woman comes in with all these issues, and she's paying him hundreds of dollars an hour. And she's like, what do I do? And he's like, stop it. And then every time she says something else, what do I do? Stop it. That was his only advice. That's what I would say. Stop being so strong and manly. Just ask for help. Get help somewhere if needed. It's not a sign of weakness. If you burn out, if you end up in the hospital, or God knows what happens to you, you're not going to be any good to anybody.
Well, kind of turning our attention to our own coaching practices, respectively, which is something we're obviously relatively immersed in on a daily basis and we know about. I've come to an amazing conclusion about the guys I coach. The guys who don't ask for help will continue on in their failures with women. They'll continue wondering why they're not succeeding. They'll continue rooting around in the dark for answers. Meanwhile, the guys who come to me are coming from a variety of different places. Some of them are starting from a pretty baseline level in terms of success with women. But notably, I've had another guy, at least one guy on the other end of the spectrum, who was already doing fantastically well and getting just about any woman he wanted. But he didn't like the just about part. He wanted all of your women too. He wanted all of my women. He wanted any woman he would choose to like him back. He wanted his chances at getting the very women he selected to be raised even further. And that was amazing to me. So not only going from good to great, but going from great to spectacular was his goal. So he's coming to me for help in that context. And I couldn't help but think, LeBron James has a coach. Tom Brady has a coach. Tiger Woods, of course, has gone through quite a bit of problems in his game in recent years, but just recently won another major for the first time in years.
Yes.
Has a coach. And he's not afraid to shop and change coaches and get a different guy in to get new input. Because anyone who is good realizes that in order to be world class, they've got to get outside their own head and they've got to get someone to help them. So the reality is, even though in our minds we think we're weak for getting help, that's just machismo. That's not masculinity. The whole idea of getting someone on your team to help you is a mark of great leadership and a mark of excellence. And those guys who put aside what I'm going to continue to call an immature mindset, Mark, of, I got this, I don't need anybody else, y'all are terrible at this compared to me. Yes, it's arrogant and it's stubborn, but at its core, it's based on lack of wisdom. It's based on lack of life experience of realizing, stone cold, straight up, that, when I get people who are smarter than me at this, my life is going to go better. My success is going to increase. And actually, because there are so many guys out there who are, I'm going to use my words carefully, foolishly being arrogant, immature, and stubborn and not getting help, you're just going to wipe the floor with those guys because you got the help and they didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
Do you see the same thing in your practice?
Yes, definitely. My business is roughly 60% women and 40% male clients. And it's not that I target female clients and that's why it's shaded that way. I think it's more because of the coaching industry. Roughly 2/3 of coaches are women. So I pretty much go right along those lines because of that. But I've seen even a difference with my clients with female coaches opening up. A lot of times I feel like a relationship coach or a life coach or something, even though technically I'm more of a business coach. They open up with things that are going on in their lives or keeping them from doing the things that they have to do. The male clients of mine, I have to prod more when they're not getting their homework done. They're not taking the action steps. I know something's up. I have to usually ask a number of questions till they open up a bit more. Not all of them, but generally speaking, the men are a little bit closed off and afraid to admit any sort of vulnerability. It's once they're open with me and admit, yeah, here's what's going on, Mark, I'm dealing with this or that, then we can get past that. We can get them back on track.
Yeah, I think that's very much in line with what I've seen also. So what would you say to these gentlemen, Mark, if they're feeling like, hey, you know what, this podcast is hitting me right between the eyes? They're describing me. I've been this Lone Ranger. I've had this mindset for at least my current project, if not my whole life. How do I start opening my mind and ridding myself of this stubbornness that's keeping me from asking people for help? And what are the steps? I mean, how do I retrain my mind? How do I get out of that rut?
Well, if you want to be successful at doing something, then you probably want to follow people who are successful doing whatever it is that you're doing. So, or want to do, sorry. So we've been, as we've talked about here, pretty open that successful men in particular are willing to ask for help and willing to be open. So if you keep doing what you've been doing, it's like Dr. Phil said, how's that working out for you? You've got nothing to lose by taking the approach that we're talking about today, where you're asking for help and you're changing course and doing things differently. And you'll find yourself a lot less stressed and everything else. So I know it can be tough to see that if you're in a certain place in your life and it may not register, but that's all I'm saying is that any successful person I know has been willing to ask for help. They've been open in sharing different struggles that they're going through. Now, there's a difference between sharing struggles and going too far. So I see it in the coaching world where there's some coaches that, well, one in particular posts about crying himself to sleep every night, listening to sad music and drinking Jack Daniels. But then in the next post, he's looking for clients and wants you to buy his program. That's probably a little too authentic. He should probably be getting help, or sharing screenshots of a bank account. I saw another apparently seven-figure coach sharing a bank account with $18 in her screenshot of her bank account. That's different than being authentic. You're still in business and you have to present yourself as a business. So be authentic, but don't come across like those people when I say be authentic. But getting help, there's nothing wrong with it. The people who are most successful in our field admit that they are not perfect. That makes them more relatable. And I'll share one other quick story about Tony Robbins. I mean, overall, I like a lot of Tony Robbins stuff. But I found that his earlier stuff where he talked about some of his struggles and washing his dishes in his bathtub in his bachelor apartment and stuff like that, I related with him a lot more than that compared to now. A lot of times I see the glossy, Superman image where everything's perfect, like with his latest documentary that was on Netflix. It's good to be able to relate to you. I think relatability can be profitable. So that's my 2 cents, or I guess in that case it could be 6 cents or 7.
An interesting observation about what you just said. I've noticed that when people are going through hard times, they sugarcoat it and they're like, oh yeah, you know what? Everything is hunky dory. Everything is fine. And it's kind of a function of our culture, especially when you're trying to run a business. You don't want to say to the people who would be your prospective clients and customers, oh yeah, actually underneath I am struggling majorly here and I'm barely floating, but will you hire me anyway? No one's going to say that. They're going to, put lipstick on that pig all day long.
Yeah.
But once they get through it, and they have risen above and they've surpassed that challenge, all of a sudden you see blog posts and podcasts of, yeah, I was like at rock bottom just 6 months ago, but now I'm making $1 million. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought 6 months ago everything was hunky dory. Once they've gotten the help and the help has worked and they've gotten through everything they were dealing with, they want to trumpet that from the rooftop. So that's an interesting thing about human psychology is, pre-help, we're trying to hide that we have that weakness. Post-help, once we've triumphed, we want to tell everybody about that triumph, which kind of is an interesting way of looking at it. If you're in that abyss right now, someday when you get out of it, you're going to be very proud that you got out of it. You're going to be very happy that you got out of it. And just like you said, it's Einstein's definition of insanity, right? If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you always got. So you need a different way of looking at it and you need a different set of eyes. I also agree 1,000% with what you said about being too vulnerable. And of course, I'm sure there's people out there who are like, oh, you can't be too vulnerable. Oh, the hell you can't.
Yeah.
There's some things that are just too much information. And one of the things that I always scratch my head about are the people who talk about how wonderful a dating coach they are. And they get on a different Facebook group for specifically dating coaches, not yours, that I'm a member of. And they ask other coaches how to coach the people who are coming to them. And they're asking very simple questions like, oh, this guy's in the friend zone. What do I tell him? And it's like, wait a minute. I thought you were crowing about how great a dating coach you are and you don't even have an answer for that one. that's being a little bit too vulnerable. I think that when you are styled as an expert in your field, it's okay to position yourself as the expert in that field. Sure, you want to continue studying. You can ask for help in getting better at it. I mean, if you think about it, a 4-year degree, a graduate degree, going to school is an extended period of asking for help, frankly. You got to get better at what you're good at doing. So, I mean, if you find there are really major holes in that net of your expertise, you got to patch those up, maybe without telling the whole world about it. But at the same time, there's absolutely no shame in getting someone on board your team to help you out with things that you've never even pretended to be an expert at. No one's going to think I'm less of a coach. No one's going to think you're less of a coach, Mark, if we go out and hire a web designer. I mean, that's just being silly. So I really genuinely appreciate everything you said. And I think this is a wonderful conversation, something that's long overdue, and I think really will be meaningful to a lot of the men who have listened. Before we wrap up, I want to introduce guys to a couple things you have going on. First of all, you are a podcaster, and whenever somebody hosts a podcast, since we have a bunch of, hungry podcast listeners here, I always want to tell them that podcast exists. And Mark has a podcast called Natural Born Coaches that you can find on iTunes. What category is it in, Mark?
Well, it's in several business, but it's in the marketing category and careers as well for subcategories. Yeah.
And if you are interested in possibly becoming a coach for others in business or whatever, Mark is a coach of coaches, which is a very cool thing to be. The first step there would be to join his Facebook group called the Coaching Jungle, which is wildly popular. How many people are members now of that?
A little over 15,000 now. Yeah.
That's 15,000 people who are coaches, not just random Joes off the street interested in cars or guns or something. Yeah, that's people who are actually coaches or aspiring to be coaches. That's just brilliant. And you also have something you call the daily email system, which is brand new, a course that guys can get a hold of for a very, very good price that helps them with an aspect of building their business as a coach, or even for any kind of internet-based business at all, in a way that most guys struggle with. Tell us a little bit about that real quick.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned before, you and I are both fans of daily emails. I'm on your list. I enjoy reading them. And I've been emailing my list now for roughly 1,000 straight days, haven't missed a day. So what I decided to do, I was getting so many people asking, how do you do daily emails? And it's tough to put it into a 30-second, nice, neat little answer. Oh, yeah, here's how you profit from daily emails. So I ended up putting up everything that I had learned into this easy-to-follow program called the Daily Email System. And then what I also did was I interviewed a number of email people doing really well with email, including yourself. So thank you very much for giving your time there, just to give some different perspectives. So I have some amazing people I've interviewed as well. So it's a mix of videos and resources from me directly, but then also interviews I'm doing with other people. And it's no fluff, no filler. It's just all pure gold, what you need. Even if you don't have an email list at the moment, there's a module in there, how to grow it quickly without spending money on ads and so on. So it's a program that's not going to take 100 hours to go through, because nobody has the time to go through all that 100 hours of content. You can go through it in a weekend, get going with daily emails, and you can, whether you're and don't have to be a coach, it's any niche or any industry in online business, and technically could even be an offline business. If you're using email or want to use email, it'll work for you.
And, obviously I wouldn't have contributed to it directly had I not believed in you and your work. So I would recommend for anybody who really wants to build a voracious audience of people who want to hear from you, an email list is a great way to do that. So I'd highly recommend it. One thing, I was thinking about when you were talking about what's in that program is my list of guys is probably 4 times the size in raw numbers of Emily's list of women. And I email those guys at least once a day, and emails to Emily's list go out twice a week. I get 4 or 5 times as many unsubscribes from the women's list saying you send me too many emails.
That doesn't surprise me.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
If you send them emails every day, it's like you're building a narrative, you're building a relationship. If you only mail them twice a week, it's, kind of like, why are you sending me so many of these emails since I'm not used to reading them?
No, I love it. That's a perfect example there of why you should email daily. And you know what? You're going to chase people away, but the people you chase away weren't resonating with your message anyways. The people who remain, you're building a very strong bond with, because they're seeing, just like I'm on your list. I see Scott McKay in my inbox every single day and I'm reading them. That's building a strong bond daily.
Yeah, I think another thing there is, if your subject line is really what your emails are going to be about and you add some value, then people can pick and choose whether they open it today or not, whether it resonates with them or not. And that's fine too. But yeah, good program and something that is really needed out there, because I think a lot of guys start email lists and they just don't know what they're doing. I mean, hello, we don't ask for help, right?
That was me for the first 2 years. I had an email list. I did like everyone else. I emailed once a week, once every 2 weeks. It was boring. So the two parts of that, besides emailing daily, which completely changed my results from email, the other things I took my filter off, which I think is important as well. Because if you send out daily emails, but they're boring and they don't have strong calls to action stuff, probably not going to make a huge difference. So I took the filter off and that made the difference in addition to the daily frequency.
Yep. The old adage, if you try to please everybody, you please nobody.
Yep.
100%. What a great pleasure to have you on the show, Mark. I really appreciate it. And I want to get these guys a link so that they can get to you. And after so many Marks we've had on the show, I want to go ahead and give them a unique URL to find you at and take a look at your daily email system, among other things. And that's www.mountaintopodcast.com/jungle, JUNGLE, in honor of the coaching jungle. Once again, to find out more about Mark Mawhinney and his daily email system, go to www.mountaintopodcast.com/jungle. Mark, thanks a million. Great conversation. I love the twists and turns that these shows tend to take, and this one was no exception. So thank you very much for your very wise input.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott.
And guys, if you want to get on this email list that involves me mailing you targeted ways to get better with women and be a better man every day, you can go to www.mountaintopodcast.com and get you some. You'll see several ways you can get on the email list there. I will give you free gifts that will enrich your life, so be sure to do that. By now, I'm a guy who's about all content and very little fluff, so I will deliver what I promised to you there. If you're interested in getting some coaching to be better with women, go ahead and contact me at scott@mountaintoppodcast.com. Remember, my name only has one T in it. And of course, once you get to Mark's site, if you are already a coach and you would like to be a better coach, I would encourage you to talk to Mark Mawhinney about how to do exactly that as well. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from San Antonio, Texas. Until the next show, be good out there. The Mountaintop Podcast is copyright 2016 by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the X&Y Communications newsletter. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.